Welcome to New Rechts, or for our English listeners, New Right. My name is Daniel de Liever, and today we're going to talk about Romanian politics. For those in the Netherlands that don't know, we're in the middle of the Romanian politics. We just had the first round of the presidential elections that were won by George Simeon, and we're now almost going to have the second round, and especially what happened last year. A lot more attention should be to what actually is going on there. So I'm glad today to talk to Dr. Mihal Neamtu. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure. I very much enjoyed our conversation in London when we've met for the first time at ARC, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, if I'm not mistaken, put together by Jordan Peterson and other luminaries of the conservative movement. I very much liked your approach, and I'm very happy that in Netherlands we have such a platform as yours. And thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And for people that don't know you, you are a member of the Romanian parliament for the AUR party, so the party of George Simeon. And you're also a philosopher and author. And I guess people know you also as, you could say, the one who creates, you could say, the fundamental vision for your party and for what, especially as a philosopher, what Romanian society should look like. So I first want to start here because there's, of course, a lot of allegations I want to get into later that you see a lot in mainstream left media. But first, what is your vision as a person and as a party? What are you actually trying to achieve?
Let me just first say that I'm a member of a team of people who put together the doctrine of the party, which is a conservative with a small c doctrine, which relies on fundamental values such as freedom of expression, of course, family, faith, religion. We believe in the free market, but also in a local economy, which is trying to help local producers such as farmers and people in manufacturing industries. But of course, from a more general perspective, I would say as a philosopher, I'm a great defender of the Western civilization. I believe here in Europe, whether we talk about Holland, whether we talk about the Netherlands, whether we talk about Great Britain, whether we talk about France or Poland or even Romania, we have to acknowledge that here in this very continent, this old continent, some great things have happened, and I'm thinking here of, for instance, the important institution of the university. Europe is the first continent where the university as an institution was put together. First in Bologna, that is in Italy, then in Oxford, later on in Cambridge. And it's just extraordinary that today the universities are being flooded with the woke ideology, which tells kids and teenagers and sometimes, even adults that we have to get rid of the past. We have to start despising our mentors and our basically founding fathers in order to embrace a kind of sexual nihilism which leads to nowhere. So I'm a great lover of Europe. I'm someone who loves basically everything that Europe stood for. That is, I would say, the central notion of charity, love, which was invented, so to speak, by Jerusalem, the pursuit of truth, which was very much at the core of the Greek project in Athens, and I'm thinking here of philosophers and scientists alike,
Mhm.
Pythagoras and Plato and Aristotle. But I also think Europe was great when Rome was able to articulate a political system which prevented Rome from becoming a tyranny. And that's why they set very limited terms for, say, exercising power, and that's why Julius Caesar was banned from becoming a dictator in accordance with the Republican notion of limited mandates. So I would say Europe is a marvelous invention of the human spirit, and we have to defend Europe, whether we are Eastern Europeans or Western Europeans. The thing is, we have forgotten what Europe stood for. We have lost our connection with the past. We have lost somehow the direct relationship with our ancestors and with our, as I said, founding fathers. And that's something I'm very keen to rekindle, this spirit of reverence and gratitude towards our heroes, towards our saints, and towards our geniuses. That's something I really want to do. And I'm very glad that today in Romania there is a leading opposition party. We are actually right now polling number one. So we are about 35% in the polls, and Mr. George Simeon is polling around 55% as the presidential candidate. He's young, he's energetic, he's 38 years old. He came to ARC to listen to Jordan Peterson, and it's just a marvelous thing that, you could have a president who took notes while Jordan Peterson was speaking on the stage. I'm wondering how many people in Brussels even pay attention to someone like Jordan Peterson. So that's great.
There are a lot of good points there to uncover. When we talk about this attack on the West, in a sense, you said we kind of lost the roots of the things that made Europe great. Why do you think we actually came into this position, and what would you concretely do? Let's say if your party now leads with becoming the president, what do you think actually concretely will change for Romanians?
There are some people who are obsessed with the notion of truth, beauty, and goodness, and these are typically the conservative friends of ours everywhere, in America, in Canada, in Europe. And there are people who are obsessed only with power. And here is the big difference between us and them. Now, in order to basically get into power, you have to create fear. So people have been indoctrinated and inculcated with this notion that, just being a traditionalist means that you are a supporter of Kremlin or Vladimir Putin or something like that. People have been also indoctrinated to believe that religion is bad and that we have to get rid of that. People, unfortunately, under the influence of Marxism and radical left ideas, have been indoctrinated to hate traditional marriage. And sometimes people just discard an old institution, like, for instance, the institution of marriage, without necessarily finding out a new path towards happiness. It's easy to say, oh, I'm not content with an old tradition or with an old even definition of marriage, but it's very hard to create a new reality, whether it's social or psychological reality, which would serve basically your needs. And that's why we see a lot of miserable people these days in the West, lots of suicidal individuals, lots of people who are depressed, utterly depressed. And they somehow find somehow a way to basically create a meaning in their life by hating somebody else. And hatred started to become a vehicle, a political vehicle. And so that's why we hate our ancestors these days. We hate those who stand up for truth. We hate those who stand up for goodness. We hate those who stand up for beauty. Because self-loathing and resentment, it's an easier, I would say, it's an easier path to self-destruction than the pursuit of higher values. Whenever we talk about higher values, we have to imply that an individual must pay a price. When Jordan Peterson talks about, say, climbing the mountain, he's suggesting that we have to basically enter a new spiritual dimension in which the exercise of giving up old passions and pathological addictions is mandatory. So people do not like that. Now, we we unfortunately in Eastern Europe have been exposed for 50 years, that is 50, to communism and atheism. And because of that, fortunately this time, we grew this, how can I put it, sense of immunity towards ideology and towards especially atheism. That's why in Poland, in Croatia, in Hungary, in Romania, you'll still find lots of churches which are packed with people. And you'll ask yourself, as someone from the Netherlands, where secularism is thriving and even, very prosperous, you will ask yourself, why are these people going to church still? And I'll tell you, they go to church because they find two things: a narrative, which gives them an account of what the meaning of their life could be. So they find in church a narrative, but also they find in church a ritual, something they can participate into. And these two things, rituals and narratives, are fundamental for our own happiness. Plus the sun. Of course, we need a lot of sun to be happy. And of course, religion gives you that. Now, George Simeon is someone who is right now opposing a representative of the radical left. who thinks religion is stupid, is for stupid people, who thinks that we should get rid of traditional family, who also thinks radical left, or who think, I mean, the ideologues of the radical left, they think freedom of expression is dangerous, and that's why we need to censor. On platforms such as Facebook and YouTube and TikTok, we found a lot of censorship, and that's why we are opposing all of that.
Good. I think you're definitely good at portraying, I guess, the big contrast. I do want to, before we move into what's happening now, I also would want to know, let's say that you win the election. I think you see it in many countries where people win elections. You have Donald Trump, of course, in America. But if I look at the Netherlands, you have Geert Wilders and others, right-wing people that have won elections that
Giorgia
are
Meloni
still
in Italy, yeah.
Meloni in Italy. Yeah,
Kaczynski in Poland, yeah. Orban in
yeah,
Hungary.
yes, there are many. There are many because we see indeed that there's something is changing. But I would still say there's a big opposition to try to, destabilize these governments and make sure that they cannot succeed. So what? Let's say that we will talk next week, and your party will be victorious in this presidential election. How will you make sure that you can actually implement concrete things to make the lives better and also portray the traditional lives of Romanian people?
It's a good point, and I will confess that unfortunately, right now we have a government which is a socialist government run by very incompetent people, and they still basically have the majority of votes in the parliament. I'm member of the opposition party, but the governing party is a mixture of socialism and progressive liberalism, which of course is the basically enemy of George Simeon. Now, what we need to do is first to elect a president who has a different vision, but then when he will have the legitimacy of the popular vote, he will be able to talk to individual politicians, just like Geert Wilders was basically forced to talk to individual politicians from various parties to form a coalition. It takes time. In your case, I think it was like 6 months or so. You had
Yes.
to work out a kind of compromise, and that's democracy, and that's fine. But for sure, we will have a balanced government, not like now when we see just progressives and socialists taxing the work of entrepreneurs and basically putting the yoke of financial burden on us, the working class, whereas, of course, the elites, the oligarchs in Brussels, but also in Bucharest, still flourish. So we need to change all of that, and we can do that only with the strong hand of a president who has the popular mandate. Once you have something like 5 or 6 or 7 million votes behind you, as a politician, you can begin to negotiate from a more, I would say, effective position. So you have the upper hand in the negotiation. And I think George Simeon is a very dynamic personality. You met him in person. You know how he
Yes.
comes across. He's a very dynamic guy. He's able to talk to people from all walks of life. He has no problem in talking to smart people, simple people. That's something I'm not worried about. And I would say, if the socialist and the liberal progressive parties will resist George Simeon, will put a strong opposition to him, he has the constitutional means. I don't want to go into technical details, but he has the constitutional means to basically call for snap elections. That's a possibility in Romania. We can have snap elections in something like 3 or 4 months from now. But for sure, we need a legitimate president who represents the voice of the people. What do we need to do with this new president and with a new government? Of course, we need to fix the finances. We basically, just like Greece, unfortunately, we have borrowed too much money and we didn't put those huge amounts of money to good use. Unfortunately, lots of money have been squandered, just like in Ukraine. There's little accountability when you have corrupt governments. You give money and then they disappear into dodgy accounts. So we need to fix the finances. This is the first thing. Secondly, we need to bring back our people from Western Europe. Lots of Romanians went to Western Europe in order to work hard, not necessarily to
Mhm.
steal, but to work hard in various fields. Some of our co-nationals went to work in the agricultural fields. Some who were more qualified entered say other spheres of professional competence, such as medicine, engineering. There are lots of engineers who left the country, so we need to bring back that human capital. Of course, we have to fight illegal migration, just like you. And that's a very important thing. We want to preserve our national cohesion. We want to preserve our cultural homogeneity. It's nothing racial, but it's everything cultural here. And I want to emphasize that. Romania is a country which should fight back the desire of George Soros, Alex Soros, and even Ursula von der Leyen to bring in Europe lots of people from the third world. When you import people from the third world, you import the problems of the third world, including tribalism and religious warfare. Why should we actually host in London or in Amsterdam or in Bucharest, the divisions between various religious factions of Islam? We shouldn't do that. We should still stick to what's our identity. So there are lots of things on the plate for the future president, but I think he will also be a very good partner of the United States of America. I think just like Poland, Romania can be really a strong defender of the eastern flank of NATO. We can have strong borders, and I would be very candid with you. I think for sure Russia needs to know that Poland, Romania will stand together with the United States against any form of aggression. Not that I don't want to see peace in Ukraine. Of course, we want to see peace in Ukraine. But again, we have to show the world that we are a united alliance, but also a defensive alliance. So NATO should be not on the offensive, but on the defensive, on the defense rather, and we should make sure that these institutions like NATO and the EU do not get ideologically hijacked, right? The purpose of a military alliance is to provide defense and security. The purpose of EU initially was to bring economic prosperity, not ideological homogeneity. So that's why we have to fight back the bureaucrats in Brussels, to tell them they should stop spending money, our money, on programs such as creating a new transgender identity in the most remote villages of Romania. Why would you do that? Why would you spend money to, incentivize teenagers to change their sexual identity? Why would you do that? That's something evil. We have to fight against that. So I think we have to clean house and to bring back a sense of order.
All right. And I think I'm quite curious how you think about this, because of last year, of course, there were already presidential elections in Romania, for those that don't know. You had the first round, you also had, you could say, a more conservative person in Georgescu who actually won, to the surprise of many, the first round. As some might know, of course, the court basically annulled the elections.
The Constitutional Court, yeah.
Yes, and there were the reasoning behind this, which also the EU courts also agreed with, that there were these threats of Russian interference. This is how it was called. Of course, there were accusations. How do you look back on this? And are you afraid that, let's say, that George Simeon will win now the second round, that something similar might play out, where they will try to accuse him and try to annul the elections?
Listen, I don't think this could be a real possibility, to be honest with you. If this would happen, I think Romania will be kicked out from a lot of, I would say, political families, and won't be recognized as a proper democracy anymore. I mean, if you basically cancel the vote of the people, which is a fundamental right, we've been born with this right to vote and to be elected. If you cancel that, you don't have a democracy. So let's say what happened last year was, let's say, a derailment, a derangement, an accident, something which should never happen again. It's something we should correct. Mr. Georgescu should be basically allowed to run for the next elections. If possible, we should see all these accusations against him being removed, because they are all like fake political dossiers and files. But I don't think the United States of America will keep, for instance, just to give you an example, its military troops on the ground in Romania, because Right now we have military troops, American troops on the ground. I don't think America will provide us with security if we cancel the elections. I don't think that's a possibility. I even heard J.D. Vance threatening somehow, or making his voice heard when he said that America cannot recognize a partner as a true ally when that ally doesn't let the people vote freely in a free and democratic election.
Yes, I do. Of course, there's a big difference now also in the American White House. So it's interesting to hear from
It's good that
you.
you said that. I'm sorry, Daniel, to interrupt, but when the elections were annulled, Joe Biden was still in power. When the elections were annulled, there was a lot of interference from the European Commission. When the elections in Romania were annulled, Anthony Blinken, member of the deep state, was traveling to Eastern Europe and sending very ambiguous signals. So let's put it this way. Now there's a new sheriff in town, and that's Donald Trump. And I don't think, honestly, I don't think Europe will behave in a kind of irrational manner from 2025 to 2028. I think we will have a more concerning. Let's rephrase that. We will have, I would say, a more rational behavior from the European Commission and from other European leaders.
Let's hope that stays the case. I also want to talk a little bit with you about this narrative, because this is now also the chance for you to basically talk a little bit about the allegations that I see a lot, especially in European, including Dutch media, when, for example, the results of the first round of the presidential elections, where Simeon won, were announced. Then it always says the extreme right party is now winning in Romania. So I think we need to deal also with this elephant in the room. What would you say to those that accuse your party of being some extreme right party in Romania?
Now, what we are doing is, as you probably know, we are fighting extreme poverty. We are fighting extreme ideologies like the ideology of transgenderism, which is extreme. It's very extreme to change someone's sex, biological sex. It's an extreme measure, which some people have applauded. So we are fighting this kind of extremism, ideological extremism. We are, in a way, a very centrist party. I mean, George Simeon was asked about abortion, and he said that he will not annul or cancel the right of women to basically perform abortion, but he will encourage couples, families, and of course, individual women to accept the gift of motherhood as a gift from God. So there's nothing totalitarian, there's nothing extreme in our position. On the contrary, I would say we are a very centrist party. But just like Donald Trump, when he ran for office, you remember he was a typically, I would say, centrist New Yorker from Manhattan.
Yes.
He was somebody who, let's put it this way, had a very cosmopolitan worldview. He loved women. He had a very interesting, lifestyle. He wasn't anything. He wasn't anything close to that image of Mussolini or that image of Adolf Hitler, which the radical left wanted to portray. And so the Americans were able to get that. So now the accusation that George Simeon is somehow the puppet of Russia is fading away. Lots of Romanians have discovered George Simeon being surrounded by Americans, by politicians from Poland, by politicians from Giorgia Meloni's circle, by politicians such as, of course, the French right-wing leaders, including Marine Le Pen. Also, I think people have been surprised that Viktor Orban, who is a Hungarian, expressed a positive view on George Simeon. So he's a mainstream guy, and he will be a good, I think, president and someone who will surprise in a good way a lot of politicians.
All right, I think it's good to get it out of the way. Also, shortly, just about the whole Russian situation, because indeed there is this view. I think in the same way that indeed people talk about Viktor Orban, or even about Slovakia, of these are basically the puppets of Russia, of Putin. I guess the same thing is said about Romania. And I think for a lot of people in Western Europe, which is, of course, our point of view, most people don't really have a clue what's going on. They don't even see a difference between Central Europe, Eastern Europe. So what do you think is the relationship and the view from your party to, let's say, the West and also to Russia and this balance?
I think you can do and you can say two things at the same time. If you're like if you're a gifted person, if you're an intelligent human being, you can do and say two things at the same time. So first thing, which we say, but also we do, we say Russia is the aggressor. Russia needs to be basically needs to be taken to, I wouldn't say justice, but I would say to a kind of moral judgment for what happened in Ukraine in the past 3 years. There's no question about that. They initiated the military aggression against Ukraine. At the same time, while I'm accusing Russia for all the horrors which took place in Ukraine, at the same time, I can say, as a small country, because Romania is not a big country, it's still a small country, we need an arbiter, and that arbiter could be the United States of America. We need someone in between Ukraine and Russia, and that's the USA for us, someone who can bring peace or who can basically initiate the diplomatic process, which could end up with an armistice or maybe with even a peace resolution. And to do that, to be engaged in a diplomatic solution, to
Mhm.
accept that it's important for Washington to talk to Moscow while at the same time, legally and morally, we condemn the hundreds of thousands of deaths that took place in Ukraine. It's possible. We also say something else. We say that Ukraine needs to be more careful with its ethnic minorities, with its religious minorities. We think in Kiev there is still a lot of corruption. We still both Zelensky and his generals have to be more transparent with what they do with the money. We have given them
Mhm.
money. You have given them money. When you give someone money, you want to know what do they do with the money, right? We've given, we, the Romanians, have given the Ukrainians a lot of military equipment, including the Patriot defense system, right? So it's not bad to ask Mr. Zelensky to be more straightforward and to be more, I would say, transparent when it comes to the public finances. And so this is something we are saying and doing at the same time. Also, one more thing: some people in the Netherlands might not know, but there are a lot of Hungarian and Romanian ethnic minorities in Ukraine. People who
Mhm.
have been sent to Donbass, for instance. The question is, do you really believe someone living in Transcarpathia in Western Ukraine wants to die, really wants to die in a war which actually has no chance to be won by Kiev? I don't think so. So we have to make sure that when the possibilities, the chances for winning the war are gone, and they seem to be gone, we initiate the process of stopping the slaughter. And this is, I think, the approach of Donald Trump. And we like Trump because he says, stop the slaughter. Donald Trump, people don't know, but he read a good book when he was young, at the age of 18. All is Quiet on the Western Front. It's a book about the First World War, in which France and Germany were fighting this trench warfare. And of course, nothing was moving in terms of, the frontier or the border between France and Germany. And while nothing was happening basically on the battlefield in terms of advances or movements, people were dying on both sides. So when he was young, I mean, Donald J. Trump, he read this book, All is Quiet on the Western Front. And he started to resent this celebration of war and warfare as an ideology. And he became a pro peace guy very early on. That's why right now, when Donald Trump is looking at the map of Ukraine, when he sees that very little is happening in terms of movements on the front line, he's calling everybody, Russia and Ukraine, for peace, because he's realizing one thing, which is very basic: young kids are getting slaughtered for nothing, for naught. And that's not good. We should be, as conservatives, celebrating life. We should be preserving life, because that's what it means to be a conservative, to preserve. And unfortunately, and I will end with this, people in Brussels, people in London, people in France, and even people in Berlin do not realize that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have been sent to death, basically, without any chance to win the war against Russia.
Yes, I think indeed this is a very big tragedy, and I agree that we need more European reflection on that. And for people that are also interested in also hearing the Hungarian perspective on the minorities in Ukraine, I also interviewed a member of Fidesz of the European Parliament, Mr. Andros Laszlo, about it. You can also check it on our website, because indeed this is, I guess, something Romanians and also Hungarians have in common. But I also want to talk about, because like I also regularly interview Hungarian people, and I also have sensed, you could say, kind of a worry and these accusations that within Romania there's also this sentiment against the Hungarian minority, which is 6% of the Romanian population approximately, who is afraid also of a more nationalist approach in Romania. Do you think that this fear from Hungarians is warranted, or do you think it's overblown?
For sure. I mean, I would not deny that sometimes when politicians want to win votes, they use an inflammatory rhetoric, and sometimes, on both sides, people use that language. So you had Hungarian leaders accusing us of being, fascists, and then you had conservative leaders from our party, from my party, accusing some Hungarians for being, for instance, separatists, right? I mean, some
Hmm.
Hungarian leaders called for the separation or severing of the relationship between Transylvania and Romania, and of course, we cannot welcome that. I mean, Transylvania is a part of Romania where 1 million Hungarians live next to 7 million Romanians. It would be impossible, simply impossible, to see Transylvania being cut off from Romania. Now, I would
Hmm.
say these are just inflammatory statements made by, again, people on both sides. In Romania, right now, as we speak, and I come from Transylvania, and I have lots of Hungarian friends, indeed. Now, in Romania, I will be very honest with you, the Hungarian minority enjoys many rights, including the right to send your child to school and to study in Hungarian from the age of 6 to the age of 26. Did you hear me? From the age of
Yes.
6 to the age of 26. That is, you can even go to study for a PhD degree and write your thesis in Hungarian while you are in Romania. So I would not say that in Romania the the religious minority and of Hungarians and the Hungarian ethnic minority is treated badly. I would say, on the contrary, they have been treated very well. And, that's why I will say this: very few Hungarians left Transylvania. Actually, they did not move to Hungary. They stayed in
Hmm.
Transylvania because it's beautiful, it's picturesque, it's lovely, it's wonderful, and they can send their kids to churches and they can send their kids to school and enjoy all the rights which are inscribed in the constitution. Now, there's something we have to see here as a possibility, as an opportunity. We can create alliances between Hungary and Romania, between Hungary, Poland, and Romania, like the Intermarium project. We can start thinking about expanding our commerce and our, economic cooperation in a more fruitful way. And we can leave behind the past, which is sometimes, of course, everywhere in Europe, the past is sometimes, of course, traumatic and even hard to remember. It's true. Some of my ancestors suffered under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but I'm not going to accuse Mr. Orban for that. This is something which happened in the 19th century, and we can move on. We can just let the historians write the history, but we as politicians, we have to create new alliances. And I honestly believe there is a lot of room for cooperation with the Hungarian government.
Thank you for clarifying that. I would have one final question to you, and it is more, it's more, you could say, personal, as someone who who has a, you could say, deep philosophical foundation, and I think an outlook that is very different from most Dutch people. Even more Dutch people that are on the right, I would say, are more
Secular.
classic liberal. Yeah, secular, classic liberal. I think this is the majority of people. What would you say from your experience, from your life vision? What kind of wisdom would you share with the Dutch people, no matter religious or not, that they can use in their own lives?
No, listen, I'm someone who spent a lot of time trying to figure out the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza. And of course, Spinoza found refuge in Amsterdam. He was a basically religious refugee. And I very much value Dutch culture. And I think, you represent the best tradition of, humanism in European history. And I love, of course, Erasmus of Rotterdam, just as I love Vincent van Gogh. Of course, who doesn't love the beautiful paintings of Van Gogh? And I'm, by the way, chairman of the Committee for Culture. So this love of beauty, which is basically, I think, the source of inspiration for Rembrandt, for instance, or for Van Gogh. This love of beauty is something that unites people. And beauty is a universal category which will attract people from all walks of life, whether they are Romanians or Dutch, whether they are Polish or Hungarian. We will always be drawn to the beautiful museums of Amsterdam. We will always be drawn to the beautiful picturesque landscape of Rotterdam. And of course, we are very happy to be enriched by your culture. And we are reading great philosophers that you have hosted or even produced. So I don't think we are in any way, shape, or form a chauvinistic culture, enclosed culture, which doesn't take insight from outside. At the same time, if I may, I would
Of
say
course.
that Romania is a country where the legacy of Byzantium, which was maybe the greatest civilization in Europe after the Roman Empire, okay, that legacy of Byzantium, which started as a project around the 4th century and ended being destroyed by the Turks in the 14th century, that legacy is still vibrant, it's still there. You can find churches which are splendid and beautiful, with wonderful paintings, and which convey you a certain meaning. And whether you are a secular or not person, you can still relish and enjoy the beauty of a sacred architecture. There's no question about that. So I would invite all people from Holland, from the Netherlands, to come to Romania, to visit Transylvania, but also visit Moldova and Wallachia, because this is a place where that culture of the early Byzantines is still present. And the Byzantines loved one thing: beauty, just like the Dutch. And that's wonderful.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And if people want to follow you, where can they do that best?
Listen, I'm lagging behind. I need to build my English website, but still, they can look up for my name and find an interview I've conducted with Douglas Murray. If they put Namtsu and Douglas Murray, they would very much enjoy that interview, which is in English, and other interviews I've done in English as well on YouTube. So yeah, they can do that.
Thank you so much. And also, of course, I want to thank all our listeners. If you want to make these kind of conversations possible, please consider subscribing at newrechts.nl, and see you in the next one.
Thank you.